seated. During the summer of my college years, now almost 30 years ago, which pains me to say, but we won't get into that. During the summer of those years, I worked for a residential program that cared for troubled youth. I'm talking really troubled youth. Most of them had been court-ordered to come to this camp. So many of them had been thrown out of not just one, but 2 and 3 schools. Their family stories were horrific. Oftentimes, they had bounced in and out of foster homes after being removed from their biological families, or if they were still in their family of origin, there were issues with crime, with domestic violence, with substance abuse, with incarceration. Their stories were horrific. And so, as you might well imagine, they had what we kind of call trust issues, these kids did. I mean, in all seriousness, they didn't know who or what to trust. So it was with great reluctance that they responded to my co-counselor and I one morning when we said, hey, we're going to go on a trust walk. They looked at us like, are you crazy? And then when we said, here's how it's going to go. You're going to wear a blindfold through this walk. Well, then I heard some words that, I won't repeat for you here and now. They had no interest in doing any of this trust business. But through the counselors, eventually we had our way. And so here's how it went. They were paired up, and for the first half of the walk, one member would be blindfolded, and the other member would be sighted and would be their guide. And then it would change. The second half of the walk, the person would trade the blindfold. One of the counselors was at the front of the line. One of the counselors was at the back of the line to make sure that no one tripped and fell, got hurt, or got lost, or whatever. And we led them through this walk that involved going up and down hills, going over some rocks, going under some trees so that they had to duck. There were times when branches kind of went across their blindfolded faces. There were times when they stumbled, to be sure. We even took them through this swamp that was on the camp property. And so imagine blindfolded, feeling the mud and the water kind of begin to rush through your sneakers. That's when they really made some fun sounds. And throughout the walk, the kids would stop and they would curse and they would sort of resist, and even some ripped off their blindfolds, but then would stop and put them back on. And eventually, we got to the destination. The destination was this spectacular place with waterfalls that sort of ended in a pool that they could splash around and play on. And the kids then, and only then, begrudgingly said, well, okay, this is pretty cool. We were just thankful that it was done and then no one had gotten hurt. I'm mindful of that notion of trust walk as I think about the first lesson, the Genesis story, where God invites Abram to go on his own personal sort of trust walk. We don't get many details in this story. If you're to believe the writers of Genesis, Abram doesn't resist nearly as much as the kids from my camp resisted. Abram just essentially sort of says, whoa, okay, packs up his bag and goes. Even if you kind of read before this particular passage to try to get a sense of what's going on with Abram, you don't learn much. All you know is that he's the son of Terah, he's the brother of Lot, he's the husband of Sarai, and they have lived for many, many years in the village of Haran, and they had a great existence. It's been peaceful, it's been comfortable, it's been prosperous, it's been all good, until God meddles and disrupts everything by saying, hey, Abram, follow me. What a sacrifice he made, you know? I mean, think think about it, what a sacrifice. He's got a good. God says, listen, I want you to leave your family. I want you to leave all your possessions. I want you to leave the safety and security and comfort of this place, and I want you to go somewhere. And think about what God doesn't say. God doesn't say why. God doesn't say, well, here's where I want you to go. God doesn't say, this is what I want you to do. God doesn't say, this is what you should bring. We get no details. Poor Abram, he gets nothing but just, oh, come on, let's move up. And he does. And then he does. He packs up the bag and he takes his wife. Can you imagine what Sarai was thinking about this? Like, really? And off they go. All they have is sort of a vague and an odd promise where God says, I will bless you. I will make you the father of nations. Your name will be great. Whatever that is, that's all they have. I mean, this is an amazing story of trust, isn't it? It's just about the most amazing story of trust you can imagine. It's just about. Unless you kind of flip back to the beginning of Genesis and you look at the stories of relationships between God and God's people. That first story, that first generation where God gave everything to God's children and said, just this one thing, just don't bite, don't eat from that tree. And of course, we know how that goes. That's instantly what they do. And then, so sort of horrified, they try to hide from God. And then when God finds them, says, come on, I can see you down there. What do you think you're doing? You know, what did they do? Then Adam sort of, well, she made me do it, you know. How disappointed God must have been there. But the crazy thing is that, and there were consequences, but God still blessed them. God still gave them fullness of life. God still trusted them with life. And then the next generation didn't think God was being fair, didn't think God was generous enough. And so we have the story where one mother kills another because God wasn't generous enough. And the crazy thing is, God still blesses them. God still loves them. God still trusts them. And then there's this sort of story after story of how God's children sort of disappoint God and let God down. And sure enough, God becomes sort of so aggrieved that God decides, all right, we're going to do something a little bit more drastic and sort of, wipes away much of creation. There's the flood story, but not all creation, right? God says, no, but I want to try this again. So this family here, I'm going to say, you will be the start of the new covenant, and you will be at the heart of the new humanity. God picks Noah because God's not done with human relationship, and God trusts Noah to be the start of something new. And Noah endures the flood. And then the first thing that Noah does when Noah gets off of the ark, when the land dries up, is that Noah plants a vineyard. And God blesses that vineyard. And then Noah picks grapes from the vineyard. And Noah gets so drunk that he passes out naked on the ground. I'm not making this up. This is in the Bible. And Noah's sons come upon their naked dad, passed out drunk on the ground, and they're like, I don't think we should look at this. And they cover up Noah, and Noah wakes up, finds that he's been covered up, and he's so embarrassed that he takes it out on the son that covered him up and curses his son. But God still blesses Noah and loves him and trusts him. If you want to talk about trust in this story, the crazy, amazing, wild, knee-buckling, shocking thing isn't just that Abram trusts God. It is that God still trusts Abram, still trusts us.
to invite us into this journey, to enter into this covenant with us, to bless us along the way. God, so trusting. And here's the crazy thing. I mean, so what happens if you read on, you see that it doesn't take long before Abram and Sarai, they get hungry and they have to go into Egypt, and it appears that Sarai is this beautiful woman, and Abram realizes that Pharaoh is probably going to have the hots for Sarai and going to want her. So Abram says, listen, can we just pretend that you're my sister so that the Pharaoh doesn't kill me? Is that okay with you? And then so he gives over essentially his wife to the Pharaoh, who takes her, and thinking that Abram is Sarai's brother, sort of blesses Abram and gives him livestock and riches and servants. And I mean, even after Abram engages in this dodgy behavior and deception and sort of exploitation, God still blesses him and Sarah and loves them and honors this promise. And they become father and mother of nations, and God still trusts them. This is a sparse, short story. And there's plenty that's not very clear, but one thing is clear, and that is that if we can find the faith to trust God, then we will discover that God has never and will never lose trust in us. That's crazy. That's God. This is not just Abram's story. It's everyone's story. It's each of our story as we go on our own journeys, wherever it is God calls us to go. And God does call us. This is a story that says, trust in God, take a risk, go on the journey, stumble along the way, and you'll be blessed. Whether you are in pain or in comfort, trust in God. Whether you are lost or you believe you have been found, trust in God. Whether you are anxious and unsure and afraid, or whether you are at peace and confident and bold, trust in God. Because God has always and will always trust in us. Take that journey and believe that you are blessed.
Let me tell you about what was said as we sat at the sort of little wade pool or at the waterfalls. So we swam and we ate, and then we all just kind of found a warm spot on some rocks, and we were sunning ourselves on the rocks, and it was actually quiet, which was a pretty amazing thing for these kids, for them to be quiet, but I think they were exhausted. And then Anthony, he's from New York, so he pronounced his name Anthony. But anyhow, Anthony, who was one of the most difficult kids that I ever worked with in the 3 years I worked with. Anthony wrote to Simons and he said, this place is pretty cool. He said, but actually, I thought getting here was even more fun. It was kind of cool, blindfolded. I heard things I probably wouldn't have heard of, and it was kind of cool, sort of being surprised and trying to figure out where I was, and it was kind of funny actually, and man, I can't believe it, but Brad didn't even run me into a tree. Anthony learned that day what Abraham learned, what we would all do well to remember, which is sometimes it's not when we get there, but it's during the getting there that we discover just how blessed we really are.